Imagine a family celebrating Christmas, the stars twinkling in the winter sky above, and the warm glow of happiness filling the home. It is the one night of the year when the world feels safest, wrapped in the comfort of tradition and faith. But have you ever stopped to consider that in a single heartbeat, everything can change? Have you ever wondered why, on some Christmas nights, the laughter of children suddenly ceases, replaced by a silence so heavy it crushes the soul? Is it possible that the holiest night of the year could turn into the most terrifying night of your life? This is not just a question of fear. It is a question of history and mystery. Today, on Christian Civilizations, we are going to peel back the layers of festive cheer to reveal the true stories that have haunted the world for decades. From an American family whose children vanished into thin air while their house burned, to a Norwegian village terrorized by a tree that screamed, these are the secrets that the snow has tried to bury. Welcome to a journey into the unknown. Before we step into the darkness of these unsolved mysteries, make sure you are part of our growing community. If you are fascinated by the hidden histories and the secrets of the Bible and the world around us, please click that subscribe button for Christian Civilizations. Like this video to help us spread these stories, and if you have any questions or your own stories to share, leave them in the comment section below. Now, let us travel back in time to a cold Christmas Eve in 1945. To a tragedy that remains one of the most baffling mysteries in American history. The story begins in Fayetteville, West Virginia, on Christmas Eve, 1945. The Sodder family was the picture of happiness. George and Jenny Sodder were celebrating with 9 of their 10 children. The house was alive with the spirit of the season, with red and green lights twinkling on the roof and the Christmas tree glowing warmly in the living room. The fireplace crackled with burning wood, and the smell of holiday food filled the air. Outside, the snow was falling softly, wrapping the world in a white blanket. As the evening turned into night, the younger children were allowed to stay up late to play with their new toys. It seemed like the perfect Christmas. But as the clock ticked past midnight, a strange series of events began to unfold, signaling that something was terribly wrong. The phone rang, and when Jenny answered, there was only a strange laugh and the sound of clinking glasses on the other end. She hung up and went back to bed, noticing the lights were still on. Then, a loud thud was heard on the roof, followed by a rolling sound. Shortly after 1 a.m., Jenny woke up to the smell of smoke. She rushed out of the bedroom to find the office on fire. The flames were spreading with unnatural speed. George and Jenny frantically gathered the 4 children who were downstairs and escaped into the snowy night. But 5 children, Marion, Louis, Morris, Betty, and Barbara, were still sleeping in the attic bedrooms. George, desperate to save his children, ran to the side of the house where he always kept a tall ladder. He planned to climb up and break the attic window, but when he got there, the ladder was missing. It had been moved from its usual spot and was nowhere to be found. Panic setting in, George ran to his 2 coal trucks, intending to drive one up to the house and stand on the roof to reach the window. Both trucks, which had worked perfectly the day before, refused to start. He tried to use water from the rain barrel, but it was frozen solid. The family could only stand in the snow, screaming and watching helplessly, as their home collapsed into a pile of ash and rubble. They believed their 5 children had perished in the flames. However, the horror was only beginning. When the fire was extinguished and the authorities searched the ashes the next morning, they found absolutely nothing. There were no bones, no teeth, and no remains of any kind. Fire experts later stated that a house fire, even one burning that hot, would not be enough to completely incinerate human bones in such a short time. Even meat bones in the kitchen remained intact, yet the children were gone without a trace. The phone lines, which were thought to be burned, were found to have been cut deliberately. The missing ladder was found days later, thrown down an embankment. The trucks had been tampered with. It began to look less like an accident and more like a kidnapping. Years later, Jenny received a photo in the mail of a young man who looked exactly like Louis, with a cryptic message on the back. Did the children die that night, or were they taken? To this day, the disappearance of the Sodder children remains a haunting mystery, a scar on the history of Christmas that has never healed. We now move across the ocean to the United Kingdom, to a story that whispers of the paranormal. Imagine a small, picturesque village where the snow falls gently on cobblestone streets. It is the kind of place you see on Christmas cards. Every year, the villagers would gather to sing carols, their voices rising in joy and unity. But one year, the music stopped. 6 young carolers, filled with the excitement of the season, decided to walk to an old, abandoned church on the outskirts of the village to sing their songs. The church was an ancient, crumbling structure that stood alone in the dark, often avoided by the locals due to rumors of it being haunted. But the youths were brave, or perhaps foolish, and they ventured out into the freezing night. The wind was howling through the trees, creating a symphony of eerie sounds, but the carollers sang on, their voices a beacon of light in the darkness. Villagers watched from a distance as the lanterns of the carollers bobbed up the hill toward the church. They could hear the faint melody of a Christmas hymn. But as the group reached the heavy wooden doors of the church, a sudden, unnatural silence fell over the valley. The singing didn't fade away. It was cut off instantly, as if a switch had been flipped. Concerned parents and neighbors grabbed their coats and torches and rushed up the hill. When they arrived, they found a scene that defied logic. There were footprints in the fresh snow leading up to the church doors, but there were no footprints coming back. The snow around the church was undisturbed. They pushed open the creaking doors and searched the interior. It was empty. There were no secret exits, no trapdoors, just the cold stone walls and the dust of centuries. The 6 young people had simply ceased to exist. Some say the ground swallowed them. Others believe the church itself was a portal to another place. Locals claim that on quiet Christmas Eves, if you stand near the ruins, you can still hear the faint, ghostly echo of a carol being sung, forever trapped in the moment before they vanished. Our journey into the macabre takes us next to Germany, where a family discovered that some gifts should never be opened. The Schneider family was enjoying a traditional German Christmas. The fire was roaring and the scent of pine and gingerbread filled the house. Little Lena was the center of attention as she opened her main present from her parents, a beautiful, antique doll. It had porcelain skin, curly hair, and a mechanism that played a soft lullaby. Lena was delighted, and for the first few hours, everything was perfect. But as the night deepened, the atmosphere in the house shifted. The mother, Marie, noticed that the doll, which she had placed on Lena's bed, was suddenly sitting on the rocking chair in the living room. She assumed Lena had moved it, but when she checked, the child was fast asleep. Over the next few days, the activity escalated. The doll seemed to have a life of its own. It would appear in different rooms, its glass eyes always seeming to follow the family members as they moved. Strange things began to happen around the house. Doors would lock and unlock by themselves. The temperature would drop drastically in whatever room the doll was in. Lena began to complain that the doll was whispering to her at night, telling her secrets that a child should not know. The parents tried to dismiss it as imagination, but they could not ignore the shadows that danced on the walls, even when there was no light source. The breaking point came on Christmas night. The family watched in terror as the doll sitting by the fireplace slowly turned its head toward them. Its mechanical music box began to play a distorted, slow version of a Christmas song. Then, without anyone touching it, the doll began to move toward the fire. The father, terrified, grabbed the doll to throw it out, but as his hand touched it, he felt a searing heat. In a panic, he threw it into the fireplace. As the flames consumed the plastic and porcelain, a sound erupted from the fire that sent chills down their spines. It was not the sound of melting plastic, but a high-pitched, human-like scream. The family fled the house that very night, but the memory of that screaming doll has haunted them forever. In France, another tale reminds us to be careful who we invite into our homes. It was a stormy Christmas Eve in a small, isolated village. Jean-Pierre and his wife, Marie, were finishing their dinner when a knock came at the door. Outside stood a stranger, a man soaking wet from the rain, shivering and looking exhausted. He asked for nothing but a warm corner to sleep in for the night. Being good Christians, the couple invited him in. He was a quiet man with eyes that seemed devoid of emotion. He sat in the corner, staring blankly, barely speaking a word. At first, it seemed like a simple act of charity, but soon the couple realized they had made a grave mistake. As the stranger sat there, the house began to react to his presence. The fire in the hearth flared up in strange colors, turning green and blue. The shadows in the room began to detach themselves from the objects they belonged to, moving independently across the walls. Marie noticed that while the stranger sat perfectly still, his shadow on the wall was standing up and pacing around the room. The children woke up crying, saying a man was whispering in their ears, even though the stranger had not moved from his chair. The air grew heavy with a sense of dread. Jean-Pierre tried to ask the man to leave, but the words caught in his throat. The stranger simply smiled a cold, humorless smile, and then, in the blink of an eye, he vanished. One moment he was there, the next the chair was empty, but he didn't truly leave. Since that night, the family claims that the stranger is still there. They hear his footsteps in the hallway. They see his shadow standing at the foot of their beds, and every Christmas Eve, a wet spot appears on the floor where he had sat. He was the guest who never left. The final story of this first part takes us to the frozen forests of Norway. In a small village surrounded by towering mountains, a man named Johan decided to cut down his own Christmas tree from a part of the forest that the locals avoided. It was an ancient grove, said to be sacred to old, forgotten gods. Johan laughed at the superstitions and brought home a magnificent fir tree. It was the centerpiece of their celebration, towering and green. But this tree was not just wood and needles. It was something else entirely. As soon as it was decorated, the family dog began to growl at it, refusing to enter the room. On Christmas Eve, the true horror revealed itself. As the family gathered to open presents, the tree began to shake violently. Ornaments fell and shattered on the floor. At first they thought it was an earthquake, but the rest of the house was still. Then they heard a low moaning sound coming from the trunk of the tree. It sounded like a person in agony. Johan approached the tree, axe in hand, but before he could strike, the branches lashed out like whips. The tree seemed to be alive, its limbs moving with purpose, and then came the scream. A deafening, piercing shriek erupted from the tree, shattering the windows of the house. Blood-red, warm blood began to seep from the bark, staining the floor. The family ran for their lives into the snow. They watched from a distance as strange, ethereal lights danced around their house, entering through the broken windows. The next day, the tree was found withered and black, as if it had been dead for 100 years. The house was filled with a stench of decay. Johan never went into the woods again, and the villagers say that the tree was a vessel for a vengeful spirit, disturbed from its slumber. We have already explored 5 terrifying tales of Christmas horrors, but the journey is not over. The shadows lengthen as we delve deeper into the mysteries that plague the festive season. From unidentified lights in the sky to ancient demons that crawl out from the underworld, the second half of our investigation reveals that the darkness of winter hides many things. If you are just joining us, please remember to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Now, let us return to the United States for a story that combines the fear of the unknown with the vast emptiness of the winter roads. Imagine driving home for Christmas with your family. The car is packed with gifts, the heater is running, and the radio is playing holiday tunes. This is what happened to an American family traveling through the lonely highways of the Midwest. It was late at night, and the road stretched out endlessly before them, flanked by snow-covered fields. The father, driving, noticed lights in the rearview mirror. Assuming it was another car or a truck, he paid little attention. But as time passed, he realized the lights were not on the road. They were in the sky. The lights were arranged in a triangular pattern, moving in perfect synchronization with the car. They were silent, hovering just above the tree line. The children in the back seat began to point and scream, claiming they could see a shape moving inside the light. The car radio suddenly went static, emitting a high-pitched screeching noise that hurt their ears. The father tried to speed up, but the car engine began to sputter and die. Everything went dark. The headlights failed, the dashboard went black, and the car rolled to a silent stop in the middle of nowhere. The triangular lights descended, bathing the car in a blinding white glow. The family felt a sensation of paralysis, unable to move or speak. And then, just as quickly as it began, the lights shot up into the sky and vanished. The car restarted on its own. Terrified, they drove the rest of the way in silence. But the true horror awaited them upon arrival. When they reached their destination, they looked at the clock. A trip that should have taken 4 hours had taken 7. There were 3 hours of missing time, 3 hours that none of them could account for. To this day, they do not know what happened during those missing hours on that lonely Christmas road, but the nightmares they share suggest they were not alone. We now shift our focus from the skies to the ancient folklore of the Alpine regions. While most of the world waits for Santa Claus, the children of Austria and Bavaria know that St. Nicholas has a shadow. His name is Krampus. Krampus is not a jolly man in a red suit. He is a horned, anthropomorphic figure, half goat and half demon. While Santa rewards the good children, Krampus is there to punish the bad ones. He carries birch branches to swat naughty children and a sack on his back to carry them away to his lair. This might sound like a mere fairy tale to scare children into behaving. But for one village in the early 20th century, the legend became all too real. During a particularly harsh winter, several children disappeared from their beds on the night of December 5th, known as Krampusnacht. There were no signs of forced entry, no footprints of human intruders. The only clues found were strange, cloven hoof prints in the snow outside the windows, prints that stood on 2 legs, not 4. Inside the homes, parents found pieces of coal and coarse black fur snagged on the windowsills. Panic swept through the village. Search parties were organized, but the dogs refused to track the scent, whining and cowering in fear. The children were never found. The locals believed that Krampus had come not as a myth, but as a physical entity, claiming his due. To this day, the Krampus parades in these regions are not just celebrations, but a ritual to appease the darkness that lurks in the mountains. In the freezing lands of Iceland, another creature stalks the Christmas night. It is known as the Yule Cat, or Turin. This is not a domestic pet, but a giant, vicious beast that towers over houses. According to Icelandic folklore, the Yule Cat roams the countryside on Christmas Eve, looking for people who have not received new clothes for Christmas. It sounds like a strange rule, but in the old days, getting new clothes meant you had finished your work and prepared for the winter. Those who hadn't were considered lazy, and they became the prey. In the 1980s, a group of tourists went camping in the remote Icelandic wilderness during the holiday season, unaware of the local legends. They were well-equipped and experienced, but they never returned. When rescue teams found their campsite, it was a scene of chaos. The tents were shredded as if by giant razors. Supplies were scattered everywhere. But there were no bodies. The only thing the rescuers found were massive paw prints in the snow prints, far too large for a polar bear or any known animal. Intermingled with the wreckage were shreds of the tourists' clothing, torn to ribbons. The police officially blamed a freak avalanche or a polar bear attack, but the locals knew better. They whispered that the Yule Cat had found a meal in the foreign strangers who dared to sleep in its territory during the holy nights. Our journey takes us further south to Greece, where the terror comes from beneath the earth. The Greeks believe in the Kallikantzaroi, a race of small, goblin-like demons that live underground. For most of the year, they are busy sawing down the world tree that holds up the earth. But during the 12 days of Christmas, when the sun's power is weakest, they come up to the surface to cause chaos. They are described as having red eyes, hairy bodies, and donkey legs. A farmer named Nikos lived in a secluded house near the mountains. He was a skeptic who didn't believe in the old stories. One Christmas, he decided to leave his fireplace unlit, ignoring the tradition that fire keeps the demons away. In the middle of the night, he was awakened by the sound of scratching on his roof and the smell of sulfur. Before he could react, the door burst open and a horde of small, screeching creatures poured into his home. They destroyed his furniture, ate his food, and terrified him beyond measure. Nikos managed to survive by climbing onto his roof and waiting for the sun to rise, as the creatures cannot stand sunlight. When the villagers found him the next morning, he was incoherent, his body covered in bruises and scratches. His house was wrecked, filled with a stench that took weeks to dissipate, and Nikos himself never forgot the terror he had endured. To this day, the villagers warn their children to honor the old customs, lighting their fireplaces on Christmas Eve, lest the Kallikantzaroi return to claim their due. The darkness of the season is not always imaginary, and in some corners of the world, it walks among us, unseen but ever present. As we conclude this second part of our journey into Christmas horrors, remember that the season of joy is also a season where shadows linger. From the vanished children of America, to haunted dolls, to supernatural creatures stalking the snowy landscapes of Europe, these stories remind us that the holiday season has always been intertwined with mystery and the unknown. History is filled with events that defy explanation, and folklore often masks warnings about forces beyond human understanding. While families gather around the tree and lights twinkle on rooftops, somewhere in the world, unexplainable events continue to unfold, leaving questions that have never been answered. The stories you have heard tonight are only a glimpse into the chilling realities that exist alongside our festive traditions. As you celebrate Christmas this year, look carefully at the shadows, listen to the whispers of the wind, and remember, not everything that shines is safe, and not every silence is peaceful. Thank you for joining us on Christian Civilizations. If these tales intrigued or unsettled you, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share your thoughts or your own mysterious experiences in the comments below. The mysteries of Christmas are far from over, and in future episodes we will uncover even darker, stranger stories that history has kept hidden from sight. Until then, keep Keep your lights burning, your hearts alert, and your curiosity alive. The shadows may be closer than you think.